Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 299 of Kouryer Podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Alexander Alza. He's a senior slash lead 3D environment artist at Bethesda Game Studios from Florida. And of course, before getting into the conversation, the captions, you can find the ID to his Instagram account, the links to his Twitter and art station. And yeah, so in the art station, there are a lot of the artworks you can see in detail. So there's some cool artworks there. If you're looking for inspiration as an environment artist, you should definitely check it out. And without further ado, how you're dealing with the humidity in Florida right now?
Yeah, summertime pretty notorious here in Florida. So I'm staying inside a lot, or if I'm outdoors, I'm in a pool, just cooling myself off there. Honestly, I've gotten used to the humidity, so that I've kind of built a little immunity to it, if you will. But it's okay. I can't complain, man. I've lived all around the states, and I've experienced crazy blizzards and different extreme weathers, so it's all right. It's manageable, not for everyone, but I'm okay with it.
All right, good to know. And the reason I mentioned that, I just want to quickly point out that today, as we're talking right now, is July 21st, 2024. It's 6-7 p.m. Istanbul time. It's probably 11:07 a.m. for the time.
You got it.
And yeah, we're recording in like the middle of the heat of the summer, so just want to point that out. And the reason I point that out is because episode 300 has already been pre-recorded like a month and a half ago. And this episode is technically going to be the last episode I'm going to record, for like the next couple of months later, as I've mentioned in a couple of previous episodes. So I just have to quickly point that out. So yeah.
Quite the honor, man.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. So technically you're 300, to be honest, but yeah.
Congrats, by the way. Like that's no small accomplishment. So congrats to you on being
so much.
And before we get started, thank you as well for inviting me.
My pleasure.
Finding me out. And yeah, man, like I really appreciate the stuff that you do, like the stuff that anyone does to kind of bring light to the people of the industry. I think that's fantastic, because so often, you got your superstars, you got your Kojimas of the world, where it's like, hey, spotlight is on them. But you often don't really hear from the people that are down here, doing all the dirty work sometimes. So I really appreciate people such as yourself that kind of bring a light to those of us in the industry that don't necessarily have a voice that often.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, I don't want to go on a tangent about this, by the way, but I'm just going to say this. Like, if I imagine myself as some 15, 16-year-old in the year 2114, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully by the time the world hasn't gone to apocalypse, right? And I want to become a video game developer at that point of time. Like, if that's going to be my hyper obsession, I'm going to nerd out and geek out and just try to read as much about the history of the thing that I'm researching as much as possible, and I want information, right? So most materials will be just interviews, as you said, with the big dogs of the industry or something, But for me personally, like, if I had like interviews of people like in 70s and 80s, which we have right now, by the way, like, but not that much from people in the game industry, I watched them, and I'm sure some person who's like super into video games, like in 100 years, would really appreciate these interviews. Like how do people use it? Like, do the environments? How do people use it? The concept of how worked it? What happened in the great like rise of AI after 2020, stuff like that. How people dealt with that.
So the pre-AI world, yeah.
So these podcasts are kind of like a time capsule, and that's one of the mindsets I have, going forward with this, because I think they're really important.
That's great, man. Yeah. And again, that echoes with me, because I mean, I started in the industry in 2006, where like there wasn't really, the resources weren't necessarily as available. So I would have loved to have, been able to dig in to this kind of stuff, like behind the scenes stuff. Like that was always juicy for me. Like whenever a game came out that had like a little mini documentary in it, where they kind of just show you like, super curated, but like, here's how we made God of War or whatever. Then it's like, oh, I continue to eat that stuff up. So any sort of like no clip documentaries that you see on YouTube or whatever, it's like that stuff is so invigorating to me, because that I don't know, that ignites the creative juices for me. Like, oh, I love this. It reminds me of why I love doing this, because the creative process is such a, like unpredictable beast.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of, how you started, let's actually start off with, how did you get introduced to the world of art, like creative arts and everything, and you just decide to go on an art path in your life? Like basically, what is your origin story? And what led you to choose like art as your main thing? Aside from, of course, the obvious answer is that's because I liked it. But I
Yeah.
want to know the real story of how did it all happen? How did you know art was your thing, and how did it move forward afterwards in your teenage years, in your school years, in your university years? What choices you made? Just
Yeah.
everything, the whole story.
Yeah, man. That's I mean, I think it all starts with genetics for me, because my dad was always into like oil painting. Now, he never, growing up in Peru, that wasn't really going to be a fruitful career for him. So he would do that as a hobby, just oil painting, like recreating existing paintings, that kind of stuff. So I know that within me there's a little artistic flair just because of his genes. But since I was little, I was always that kid that was doodling, drawing stuff. At a certain point, you realize, like, people tell you, like, hey, you're pretty good at drawing, or you can draw like Mickey Mouse really well, or whatever. So that, coupled with my parents, my mom nurturing that, like, putting me in certain like drawing classes, like after hours, just I would be in sometimes classes with a bunch of adults, and we would just kind of just be whatever drawing stuff. And so that kind of gave me the confidence that, like, okay, hey, I'm pretty good at this, and I really enjoy this. Like, I love the process of just creating stuff. Um, that that's one part of it. And then suddenly, at a certain point in my life, I went to a friend's house, and they had a Nintendo Entertainment System, and I was blown away. I played Atari stuff before in Peru, but never like Super Mario or that kind of stuff, where it's like, wow, this is possible. Like, this is insane. So I think, in a weird way, at that point, I'm like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to make art that's interactive, tell stories, blah blah blah. So from that point, I was fortunate enough in high school, here in the States, that we had like a representative from the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale come by. Like, a lot of times they have like representatives from different art colleges come in to high schools to basically be like, hey, come to my school, pay a lot of money, get your degree. This one happened to work because they were just starting out with a game art and animation program, a bachelor's program for that, which is basically, at that point, was mostly computer animation that was kind of bleeding into like, oh, let's also do some game art stuff. Um, so I happened to go there really almost at the very beginning of that program, which is kind of cool. I mean, I didn't. I learned a bunch of stuff that I probably wouldn't necessarily have learned otherwise, but it was great. It was a great experience. I will preface this saying that I knew nothing about 3D programs going into college. So a lot of people these days, fantastic if you can learn a lot from from YouTube school, as I call it. Uh, but knowing nothing in there, I dove headfirst into it in college. I made sure that I was like, top of my class, doing everything I could to kind of really stand out. And thankfully that led to an internship, that then led to my first job, where I was at for like a decade before they shut their doors. Um, and since then, I've just kind of bounced around, like, to wherever the studios were, which a lot of them obviously here in the States are like on the West Coast, California area. So that meant I had to move my family across the United States from the East Coast to the West Coast and jump around a little bit. Um, and then at a certain point, we have a COVID hit, and it basically presented the opportunity for a lot of these studios to be like, oh, I guess we can do things fully remote. And that led me to the decision to move here to Florida, which is where my parents live. There's no kind of game scene here in Florida. It's just basically, well, at least where I'm at in Florida. But I just came here basically to have my family be closer to my parents, so we can, I can still get my work done. I can be arguably more productive than I was in a studio setting. And I'm loving life, man. Like I don't, my office is one of my upstairs rooms. So it's fantastic. It's not for everyone because it's definitely a super isolating experience. If you crave going out to lunch with your colleagues and and that kind of socializing, then this will just kill your zest for life. It's so you have to be really thankfully I have a family, I can interact with them. I'm not just living here with like a cat or something. But um, but yeah, that's kind of been like the long story is the passion's always there and it continues to be there. I've been at this for I think 18 years now, and I still love learning. Whatever my titles may be, it's like I still feel like you can get a lot from some person that's just graduating college. They like, yeah, they don't have the experience you do in the industry, but maybe they think about something in a different way than you do. So that's never left my mind, is that if you get to a point where you feel like, yeah, I have mastered this, then it means that it's probably time for you to go, because this is not an industry where you've mastered it and you can just cross your arms and just like, say that's it. Like this is a constantly evolving industry. And that's partly what I love about it, is that, hey, you're always learning new techniques. Something's going to come up around. And I love experimenting, yeah, with new ways of problem solving. And some of them I might implement into my personal or professional work, and some of them maybe not. So it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. I know the industry is not in the best state right now, but I'm very thankful that it has been able to provide for my family and to give me that satisfaction of, I'm living the dream basically. So yeah.
All right, awesome. And here's the next thing that I want to actually ask you about. When you kind of mentioned that in 2006 you started working in the industry, starting from 2006, right? Now I want to ask you this, like, out of all the positions that's out there, like in the industry, like, in the market, in the video game industry, what led you to choose environment art out of everything else? And also, like, on a side note, how was it like working as an environment artist, like in 2006? Like how things were different. Like tell us about the whole.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, early on, I started on a Nintendo GameCube title that never made it. I think it was then going to be a Nintendo Wii title. But anyway, it's one of those things that just got canceled halfway into production. So then I immediately got moved into work on I don't know, you probably can't see it, but the Call of Duty for Nintendo DS titles. And that we're talking like extremely bare bones. Like that's a whole challenge onto itself, is to be like, let's make a first person shooter, but you got no kind of budget, poly wise, texture wise. So you have to be super creative in how you do that. And it was a cool challenge. I mean, I know that, at that point people were starting like, ooh, normal maps and Gears of War and things that were looking really state of the art. But I was over here trying to solve different problems of like, okay, how do we make a level with like, I don't know, 200 tries or some ridiculous number so it was a different world back then for sure. And I really appreciate that I had the lessons of being efficient working with those kind of restrictions. Because if you can do that, then I have a lot of hope that you can do like really high res sculpt, to low poly transfers, that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend it for anybody, even if you're doing a portfolio piece, like do something that just feels like a little bit lower poly, just to kind of restrict you, get you thinking in that way. And it's certainly, I think, has paid dividends for me in the way that I work with AAA stuff, where I'm very much a stickler for like poly efficiency, making sure, hey, everything's welded, making sure there's no wasted edge loops, etc. So I think it's good. It's a good disciplinary tactic. But again, that was a long time ago. So nowadays people are, you got a lot of automated processes and things that can help you move along way faster.
Yeah, I'm kind of, as I mentioned before, like I think earlier in the podcast, like I'm really fascinated, like myself as someone who's really into loves video games. I into the history of video games, how they're made, like every single minute aspect of it. And there was this like exam center, which was actually centered in the basement of a hotel in
Mhm.
Istanbul, where I sometimes had to go to take IELTS exams, right? And the thing is, in the lobby of it, there was like a bookshelf, and there was a book about like I think it was a video game book, how video games are made, and it was published in 2005.
Mm.
And every three time I went there, I always picked that book up, and used to read that and take pictures of it. And that book was really amazing. It showed the process and softwares of like how characters were used to made, how textures were made, what softwares they were using. Like it was talking about like you would just why don't we have books like that anymore? I mean, I guess instead of that, I mean, like that's kind of stupid of me to say that because I guess instead of that, right now we have podcasts, we have videos, we have other forms of media, I guess. So having a book is redundant, but
I think we move so fast too. By the time that book is published, it's like, well, this is yesterday's news. It's like when you watch a tutorial for a specific version of Blender or something like. But now it doesn't work that way because now we're on this version, so everything gets
yeah,
outdated so much faster that it's basically the publishing world can't really catch up when it comes to that. But I miss that too. That was a nostalgic thing we used to do back in the day, where like, oh yeah, there were books about it, or I was big into magazines, so whatever game
I was
magazine,
same.
like yeah, I would just go into the stores just to read all the magazines, never buy them, I would just read them. Um, so yeah, but sorry, I was kind of long-winded there, but to go back, you initially had a question about environment art as well, like why I picked
Yes,
environment art.
yes,
And I think that's just it's funny because sometimes when I'm doodling or just drawing stuff, I tend to draw a lot of characters, just whatever, just uh uh but when I'm working on full on like computer, like a big scene, obviously I tend to really lean more towards environment because of the storytelling and because um, it's so cumulative. Like you can make a really awesome asset that you can be proud of and spend a long time and be like, okay, well, this is this asset that I spent a long time on. It's just going to be one little tiny part of this huge environment that I'm working on. And so something about that is very satisfying as well. Um, I it's really just a thing where I've leaned towards it just because of that, because I love this probably goes back to the traditional fine art background. Um, just compositionally, like I love seeing beautiful compositions, and in the games you try to work with lighting and other teams to be like, hey, when you're coming out of this cave, this is what you want to see. This is going to be the frame picture that the player is going to see. Obviously, with video games, you have so much freedom that the camera can be looking anywhere, but hopefully you get a few moments where it's like, bam, there's your shot right there. And so those kind of things to me are super important. They leave a lasting impression on the player, and I think that's what probably pushes me towards environment art, because it can be it can be intimate and really cool and hyper detailed, or it can just be a grand thing where it's like just leaves you in awe, and it's all part of the gameplay experience. And hopefully, we do our part. I mean, I can't say enough about what lighting does, what audio does. It's such a synergy. And this goes back to even Nintendo Entertainment System days when you played a game. I loved like the Castlevanias, the Mega Man games. And that's all just such a beautiful like product of so many little things, not just art coming together. So it's a driving factor for now. I mean, it's what I lean toward is the environment art side. I don't mind looking at other stuff too, but I don't think I'm as critical, like with animations or whatever. It's like when it's wrong, but like I couldn't like dissect something and tell you how to make it right or whatever, because it's just not necessarily my passion there. But yeah.
oh yeah, I can definitely like understand why you mean that. Because for me, especially like, environments were always the most fascinating thing for me about games. Like, I don't know what, maybe it was because I was a kid or not, but the old games used to have like such a mystique and intrigue to them, like especially the environments. Like
Hmm.
a couple examples I can mention is like there was this like third person Harry Potter game about I think the second installment of it, which was a really fun game actually. Like it's crazy, like what a fun game they made. Um, Actually, I might reinstall and practically play it again after like 20 years, I guess. I'll probably do that. But like there was that, there was Serious Sam, there was like a lot of first person shooters that had secret areas, like secret things.
Hmm.
And we still have it in games, but it it felt different, the level design, the art. Maybe it was a lack of, maybe because it wasn't super realistic, it felt still a bit abstract, right? So it
Hmm.
would give you that feeling of like, kind of mistaken. But now because everything is all day, every game tries to push for like realistic, realistic, realistic. Like it doesn't have that like, mystique, like
Yeah.
there's a balance to it. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look hard enough, you could probably still find those things. Like, I know the indie space, they're pushing things that are sometimes wacky, but sometimes they really hit a nerve, like, like an Among Us type of game where it's like, oh, this is doing something different. Um, Obviously, the bleeding edge, that's kind of like what gets the eyeballs, the beautiful looking AAA, God of Wars, Call of Duties, those type of games are what moves the needle as far as like whatever, like your big sales, your big marketing pushes. um but I think there's still spaces out there for people that like soccer, football games, anything that whatever you might enjoy. Hopefully you can find something out there that suits you. I think maybe back then we were maybe restricted a little bit because we had less choices, and again the technology was so limiting that people really had to get creative with like, okay, how do we make, I mean, I've seen some, like, I think some documentaries where it's like, how do we make the music even work on this game? Because we only have like three little blips to work with. And it's like, we got to make it, and they somehow make it into a beautiful soundtrack. So it's one of those things where like, it forced ingenuity a lot. Whereas these days, I think, um, you could be coming out of college and be like, hey, I want to make an MMO in Unreal Engine with me and two of my buddies. And it's like, you have that ability, like good luck to you. I always say, uh, start small, but I think people, because of the powerful tools that we have this false sense of, I can make something that looks just as good as something that's out there. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's like I said, you're always going to find little creative nooks. It's just harder, I think, to find because the market is so flooded. Um, that it's hard for you to find like the right thing that might resonate with you. I try to do that a lot these days. Thankfully, I have Xbox Game Pass, and that's given me an opportunity to play a lot of smaller games that I normally wouldn't have the time to, or would be like, I'm not going to spend like X amount of dollars for this because this is probably not something that I would thoroughly enjoy. But with Game Pass, it's like, all right, let me give this a try for like an hour, and then sometimes it's been like very pleasantly surprising experiences. And I try my best after I play and complete a game to go on like on Twitter/X and give a comment to the devs, like at mention them and be like, hey, just finished this game, like amazing work, congrats, to the dev team, because it's good to kind of show them love, show them that, hey, I understand you went outside the box here. This probably isn't a game that's going to appeal to the mainstream, but it really spoke to me and it might inspire me in the future. So yeah.
Yeah, and like, do you also play games these days or so?
Yeah. I mean, I try my best. Lifestyles change. I'm a family man. I used to be able to
Of
play those
course.
humongous games. nowadays I try to play maybe shorter games, with the exceptions of like, like if a Zelda or God of War or whatever comes out, like, I play those games, uh, make sure to complete them. But like I said, I just finished up like Cocoon on Xbox Game Pass, an amazing mind-bending puzzle game. Smaller games, so things that basically I could feel like I could knock out in a weekend or two and just get a pleasant experience from that. So those are most of the type of games that I play these days.
All right, and the reason I ask that is because, like, I want to ask you, like, what has been the game that recently really impressed you with their environment art and the art direction of it?
Oh man, I mean, environment wise, like, I would say if we're talking like super like AAA ish, like the Horizon games to me are just incredible as far as what they can do with their tech and visually. Um, if we're talking more in the lower end side, um, if you play Tunic at all, uh, a beautiful, easily one of my favorite games ever, because it was inspired by like Zelda, and it's like an ortho top down. You play as a little fox, but it's a game of secrets like you wouldn't believe. Like the secrets are insane there, and you could tell that other people working behind it, like it's a love letter to the games of yesteryear, where it's like, hey, this is what's satisfying about gameplays, about that specific type of gameplay. The visuals are super simple, but colorful and just really well done. I believe he made it in the Unity engine. And again, with a game like that, much like a game with like Journey or like Limbo or Inside, it's just such a beautiful combination of everything coming together. And that's the magic kind of just happens there. And to me, I mean, that's the environments are gorgeous, but the game was also just, just incredibly engaging as well. Because you can have beautiful environments and have really lackluster gameplay. And I play a lot of those games too, just to see, obviously I want to be knowledgeable as to what's out there, what people are playing these days. Even if it's not my cup of tea, I'm like, oh, let me just give this a try and be like, okay, I see what they're doing here. But yeah, that's kind of what jumps out at me at the moment.
All right, and here's the thing: after working in the industry for like almost 18 years right now, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned that you can tell us as an environment artist? Like, imagine like this podcast has been listened by a lot of juniors who are going to get into the industry, and also people who are currently in the industry, but who might get used some of those lessons and things to just like some of the unwritten rules, or maybe just anything that would come to your mind that you think is worth sharing.
Yeah, this is actually something that I touch upon. Well, I tend to mentor just people reach out to me on social media, just be like, hey, critique my portfolio or whatever. And I'm happy to do that. And so to me, like really the one thing that you don't know as much coming into the industry is like, be connected. Like you are your own brand, and do your best to kind of represent that to people. Like, do your due diligence, be on social media, get your name out there, get people knowing, connecting your name and your face to that work, so they'll know like, oh, this is so and so style or whatever. Definitely the connections are huge. Networking, and we live in a great time as far, you don't have to go to all expensive conventions. You have a lot of different methods through social media, through ArtStation, Reddit, whatever you prefer, to really establish connections, work on small groups, do little side work, side projects. Getting ingrained in the whole community is super important. I think a lot of people can probably follow tutorials and get the skills to learn Substance Painter or whatever, and that's fine and great. But really being connected, and on top of that, being being the kind of person that people want to work with is extremely important. So I understand that a lot of us are introverted and, you know, maybe not very like social when it comes to that, but like at least be self-aware enough to be like, hey, I'm here to be a problem solver. I'm here to help. Uh, that goes such a long way, man. Like if you can take critique with a smile on your face and be like, yep, like this is, don't take stuff personal. Just be super open-minded, and be some, again, that be someone that you would want to work with, because there's a lot of people that are extremely talented, but they're, you know, maybe not the best to really work with, and then doesn't matter how talented you are at that point. It's just like, well, I'm not, I don't want to walk on eggshells around this person or whatever. So just work, that aspect is humongous. Obviously learn the skills and stuff, but those tools are things that you can always learn as you go along. And I mean, I'll obviously, like, I will say, like, I learned what I needed to in college, but pretty much 90% of what I know in the industry has been learned on the job in the studios themselves. So that's really, no matter how much you want to prepare in college, and I know that they have better programs these days that really try to mimic a short game schedule with crunches or whatever. But really, until you get into the industry, that's when I think you really get a real taste for what it's like. So my advice would just be that, mostly just like, hey, believe in yourself as a brand, and do your best to kind of connect with people. Unfortunately, a lot of jobs these days are also like, you know, maybe there might be legally required to post a job, but they already know that they're going to hire the art director's buddy from the last studio or something. So it's like, again, it's who you know sometimes too. Make a good impression, because you never know. Like, I've had people years later contact me on LinkedIn and be like, hey, we spoke 6 years ago, and you know, you want to try doing this or whatever. And it's like, oh, sometimes I don't even remember these people. I'm like, okay, great. I left a good impression on someone and I really appreciate it. It reached out to me. So you never know when that kind of opportunity might happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, making connections is super important. And by the way, a lot of people have this misconception of making connections, or sometimes how it should look like. Basically, is if you need a detailed guide for it, then you that's not what connections like. Making connections is very simple. It's just the same way you make friends in school or university. Like, don't try to look for guys. Like, I mean, sure, you can give hints how for people who might be super introverted on how to socialize, but believe me, the only guide in it is just be yourself and try to be genuine in your conversations. Nothing is more distasteful than a fake conversation that you might want to possibly lead to something. Just just be genuinely yourself. Don't worry about embarrassing yourself. Just that's, I think, like, technically I'm kind of like contradicting myself by saying you don't need a guide, but now I'm technically giving a guide. But the thing I'm trying to point out and say, just be yourself, and you have thoughts to socialize with people, just execute on them. And the only thing that might stop you is your social anxiety. And
yeah,
I mean, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but just try to work on that by forcing yourself. Yeah, but forcing yourself, yeah, that's a muscle, mental muscle.
That's basically what it is. I mean, a lot of artists, they suffer with imposter syndrome, as it's called. So you feel like, oh, am I even good enough to be doing this? Am I even good enough to be talking to this person or whatever? But life is short, man. Just throw yourself out there. What's the worst that can happen? Like, just, again, like, yeah, the time you have, make the most of it, and just put your name out there. If it doesn't work in this opportunity, try it on a different one, whatever. Just be resilient. And if you really love this industry and this is what it is for you, then hopefully, I mean, obviously, you got to pay bills and stuff too, but hopefully you can be resilient enough where some opportunity does open up for you if you've made you worked on yourself, on your skills, and obviously connected with the right people. I try to do that as much as I can too for newcomers. Just connect you with a bunch of recruiters on LinkedIn or whatever. And some of them may be very credible, some of them may not be, but it's like, hey, let me just throw your name out there. And I know it's tough these days because they have algorithms that sort through recruits. They don't even look at you half the time, but it's like cast a wide net at that stage of your career. Just be like, throw it all out there and see if anybody bites.
All right. And who are some of your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
Oh my God. I mean, that's like, yeah, we're gonna go old school on that because it's mostly gonna be people like an MC Escher type. Obviously any like Renaissance artists. I'm trying to think of something more contemporary, but I really love like that. That's the kind of stuff that initially got me just hooked on like, how you can use perspective and lighting and shadows to frame scenes. With the Escher, it was a really cool just the graphic design aspect of it, and just again warping the way that we even see. Messing with the brain is kind of a cool trick. It's like if you played Monument Valley or the sequel, they're heavy on that, obviously heavily inspired by the Escher stuff. Yeah, I mean there's so many like traditional artists that have done that kind of stuff. As far as the game world, I mean I love things that are, while some of the real stuff can absolutely be beautiful, like your Battlefield type of games, I tend to nowadays be more impressed by stylized things, like a journey, like okay, what can you do with just very minimal things? So I'm kind of, I think at this point, and that could change at any point, but right now I'm very much so much so that that's kind of what I want to do. It's kind of what I'm working on in a personal project. It's just something that's a little bit more simplified. Like, how do I limit myself? Maybe don't use any textures. Maybe do something crazy where it's like, okay, let's just let the light and the shapes tell the story. So yeah, I try to have a wide spectrum of things that I like in artists.
Right. Now, speaking of art, how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on an environment? Like, basically, what does the structure for pipeline look like?
Sorry,
Usually.
my ring light just totally went off here.
No worries. It's fine.
No worries. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. How does the process go? Is that what the question was?
How does the structure for your pipeline usually look like when you want to start working on an environment? Like, what steps do you take from 0 to 100?
Yeah, I think it's probably quite similar to other artists that you've had on here, where it's, you basically start with like sorry, my book fell. You start with like the reference gathering stuff. Well, I tend to use pure ref. So, gather as much reference as possible. Again, it depends if you're trying to, am I trying to recreate a concept art that exists out there? For me personally, on personal projects, I want to be heavily inspired by a concept, but I never do like a one-to-one. Like that's not, like sometimes you have to do that for your job. But if I have the flexibility to, I like to put my own spin on things. So I could start with something that's a beautiful concept that someone has made and just add to it or twist it around, or maybe change it's different time of day, or it's a different, weather or whatever. So from that point, then I would probably start breaking down the piece into like, okay, what are hero pieces? What are modular pieces? Thinking about like, okay, am I going to be able to do seamless tiling textures with trim sheets? These days, honestly, just because of time restrictions, because I barely have time to do personal work, that's what I favor a lot more so than like, uniquely painting or using a high to low bake, that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to get as much as I can just out of a lot of seamless textures. It's also more optimal, but it's also just a faster workflow. Or Unreal or certain other tools, they can do like triplanar projection sometimes, so you don't even have to worry about UV unwrapping. It'll just look right without unwrapping. Beyond that, then it's just about blocking it out, putting a block out in an Unreal Engine, for instance. I like to fail often early on, so I want to iterate heavily at the beginning. I want to see, okay, if I just block this out. I tend to also at this stage just put basic main lighting going, because I want to see how the lighting is going to frame my scene. I know some people, it depends on your workflows, but I like to kind of see that even without any actual materials on there, even if it's just white gray box. And then maybe start focusing on your main beauty shot, knowing that you're probably going to get other beauty shots out of it, but at least for now, and so I don't go crazy, my focus is going to be, this is my shot. How's this looking compositionally? How's it looking balanced? And then, yeah, kind of take it from there. Then maybe start refining. If I have a little bit of time, maybe work on one piece more so than others, but try to be disciplined enough to have the whole scene kind of develop evenly almost. You don't want just like this little corner to look like it's already ready to ship, but over here still have gray boxes. So yeah, and then I think towards I know I'm kind of fast forwarding through it, but then towards the end, it's just tweaking, your LUTs, that kind of like post-processing stuff that might come with it. If you have any like sequence cameras, you want to do like little dollies or zooms or whatever, that's always nice too. And yeah, I mean, hopefully documenting the process and maybe posting an accompanying blog or something is also a bit helpful. That's something I do encourage people to do as well. If you're working on a personal project, and you can post, it doesn't have to necessarily be like, weekly posts or anything, but post what you've learned, what your mistakes are, whatever, like, because that's great knowledge, not just for you, but others that are going through the same thing. They'll see like the process and learn from it. And again, you can develop connections that way. People will be like, oh, this person is really, really brutally honest about their process, and they really catalog it really well. So good to know, bookmarked, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's more complicated than that, the process, but I'm just kind of like, in a nutshell, it's sort of like, and it's time consuming these days just because I don't have a lot of personal time. Otherwise I would be like, let me just power through in 1 week and make something amazing and post it.
All right. Now, speaking of works, a couple of things. First of all, in your bio, like in our session, I really like it. My goals are simple: to be a good dad to my kids and husband to my wife. Next to that, I want to take pride in making awesome art for amazing games. And ever since my NES, I fell in love with video games, and I aspire to be a part of teams that create games which leave an impact on people, which is really nice. And what else is nice is also, like, after reading this bio, you see the cover on your art station. Is that like your personal work as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like the woman with the baby?
yeah. That was a fun little project I did. There was a phase. I mean, I guess it's not a phase, but like there was a point where I discovered a marmoset tool bag, and I loved how easy it was to, and this is coming from somebody who's worked on game engines mostly, but it's like, oh, I can actually just you can bring the most boring cube and into marmoset tool bag, and then suddenly it'll be like lit beautifully, like, wow, this cube looks amazing. So that's when I started. I went through a real heavy phase where I'm like, oh, I want to actually make a scene on here. So I made a couple of scenes, and it's not necessarily, at least then, it wasn't a software that's really made to be. It's most for like showcasing characters or like individual props. But that was a scene that I made entirely in Marmoset Tool Bag, and it was a really cool learning experience. I think they featured me in one of their videos and some of their advertising as well. So that was really awesome, and I love sci-fi as a theme. I'm really huge into like, you know, futurism and that kind of stuff. So so that piece was really cool to do. I thoroughly enjoyed like some of the hack processes that I had to kind of go through because they didn't have the benefit of a game engine to do a lot of the heavy lifting for some things. So um so yeah, no, that's thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that was a cool project.
And yeah, right now I want to like talk about some of your projects. So first of all, let's mention the elephant in the room, which is like a Starfield, which is like the main centerpiece of all the works. Who, if you're watching this on YouTube or anyone who's listening, you're probably seeing the works, you know, down under us right now. The Starfield stuff. Yeah, exactly. And so, how did that opportunity come by, and what can you tell us about working on that? But of course, I need to mention something. Aquila City is, as I said before in our previous call, is was my favorite location of the game, and I actually took a lot of inspirations from that environment as well. So, all right, I'll leave the microphone to you. So, share with us anything you can.
Yeah, obviously, you know, being happily employed at Bethesda, I can only say so much. But yeah, thank you for your kind words. I was the artist basically responsible for Aquila City. Now, I will preface this by saying AAA games, humongous, huge effort. So there's a lot of people that did materials, foliage, lighting. There's so much that goes into it. I just happen to be the owner of the city, and I put a lot of stuff together and created a lot of custom buildings and whatnot. So, but I definitely, you know, I appreciate any kind words there. Yeah, I mean, for Aquila City, it was really, I appreciate the freedom that they gave me as far as when I came into it. I had the opportunity to kind of put my own little flavor on it. So while it was already the groundwork was there, looking great, I'm like, okay, now let's make it feel a little bit more lived in by adding this or that, you know, this, extra touches. Some of that also I harkened back to my experience growing up in Peru. I'm like, hey, this kind of feels a little bit like some of the areas that I grew up on. And it's like I want to ground it. It's sci-fi, it's out there in the stars, but at the same time, hey, there's humanity here. So I use some of that life experience to kind of ground it into something that's relatable, hopefully for many of us. It's not just like, you know, super shiny, clean plastic or whatever. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was a huge effort, and I definitely am very thankful for the team for trusting me with whatever crazy additions I had in there. But I really definitely like the city's team, the fantastic group of people, and you know, did a fantastic job. So couldn't be happier with how that turned out, and you know, hopefully more good things coming in the future. You know, there's only so many things I can say here. So
All right, awesome. But I just need to quickly mention something else. The previous artwork we talked about was named Jezero, and I posted the link in the captions of this podcast of the article in the Marmoset the website, which is rendering sci-fi environments in Toolbag, which you made actually based on the Jezero environment. So that's for anyone who's interested. You know, that's in the captions as well. The link to that, so you can check it out. And all right, there's a bunch of more games to go through. There's Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Destiny 2, God of War, Gravity. Like, let's go through all of them one by one if there's anything interesting you want to add about them.
yeah, I mean, obviously, super honored to have worked on those franchises. I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to kind of, you know, contribute to those amazing franchises. Personally, the coolest part for me is having worked on their custom engines, their custom tools and pipelines. So it's really been, you know, just mind expanding because you're not just working on just one engine the whole time or something. It's like, oh, okay, this is how they work. So that's in itself is just priceless. Besides, you know, being associated with these huge franchises, it's like the tech And absolutely, without a doubt, the people, and obviously this is in a pre-COVID world where I could be in the studio and, hang out with my peeps and all that. Um, so those experiences, man, I wouldn't trade that for anything. That's fantastic. I loved my time in LA with Sony Santa Monica. It was amazing, totally different than my time in San Diego, Prime Moon Studios, which is we worked on Destiny and Call of Duty. And then very different from my time with Bethesda when I was in Dallas, because I'm based out of the Dallas studio. So yeah, I mean, it's been quite a ride. I don't know specifically if I can talk too much about them in detail, but it's they've each had their own really cool contributions to my life. So I'm thankful for those experiences.
All right, and here's the thing: we've talked about so much about art-related stuff by now, but I want to ask you something completely like non-art related.
Yeah.
What's non-art related the stuff you got going on in your life? Like, what hobbies do you have, or what things you got going on that are completely non-art related, but you're just actually pursuing? Like,
Yeah, man, that's where I am such a simple person. When I talk to other people, they have so many other things going. Like I am very satisfied with my life, just being at home. Like I worked hard to have this home built that's kind of nurtures my every want and need. I I tend to exercise. I just go, play basketball, ride a bike, whatever. I make myself do that just because when I grew up, that's all it was is just soccer or playing with friends all the time. So I have a hard time just being a person that sits on his computer all day and just like, plus that's terrible for your health too. But so I try to balance out, the exercising with the family time, obviously. And then just kind of nurturing the creative process by, watching uh, movies, Netflix, playing games when I can. I love watching sports. So my life is quite simple. I don't have to go to like theme parks or concerts or travel around a lot. I'm quite satisfied being here with the family because that's like the whole point of us moving here. It's like, hey, to have family here near us and enjoy them while they're still around and active. So yeah.
all right, awesome. Now, if you remember correctly, like in the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned something about time capsules, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
this question, which is actually the final and last question of the podcast, is called time capsule, titled time capsule, right? And basically, what I'm going to ask is this: like, if you could summarize and tell us the most important and valuable life lessons you've learned thus far, that you could share with us, what would they be?
Life lessons, man. What a deep question, man. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool that the whole process of aging tends to reveal a lot to you. Obviously, things that mattered a lot to you in your 20s maybe aren't as important in your 40s. So I think it's really just about honing in on what is important to you. So there's a lot of distractions out there in the world, and I mean, social media being one of them. Like I find myself a lot of times just killing time on there. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm just kind of like scrolling for no damn reason. I try to, and I'm not one of these like rise and grind people that wakes up and exercises and tries to live every day better than the last. But it's just about finding a balance that works for you, man. It's like I do what I can with my art. I could live forever and still not get all the art that I want to get done, completed. So it's just one of those things where, like, you know what, I have to just be okay with what I'm doing. I can't spread myself out too thin. I can't be everything to everyone. I'm just gonna give it a go, try my best, and yeah. I mean, I guess the advice would just be like, hey, just find that thing that really focuses you, um, and just try your best to kind of achieve that, as cliche as it may sound. it's like, it's tough. We have a lot of distractions and a lot of negative voices. Even inside, you might have negative voices, but just being persistent, man. It's again, I'm fortunate that it's worked out for me. I've kind of fallen in the right places. So just be persistent and be good to those around you. I think one of my old um, dean of my school says something like, to paraphrase, where it's like, be nice to the people you see on the way up, because they're the same people you're going to see on your way down. So basically, it's just a way of saying, like, hey, man, treat everybody with respect, because you never know when this person that's down here is going to be your boss. So it's like, just try to be a decent human being, and hopefully, if the artistic pursuit is your pursuit, hopefully that'll just give you the satisfaction that I know that I've gotten. I'm incredibly grateful for this. I don't even know what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this. I'm sure my skills maybe translate to other things, but it's like, I love video games still after all this time, and I'm very happy that I get to work with this, and it can provide for the family, and it brings me great joy. So, yeah.
Right. Awesome answer. Like, amazing. And well, thank you so much for coming by. Where can people contact you if they had any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm around on social media. I think basically just Alexander Alza. I mean, they can always email me too if people have questions or whatever. I'm always happy to critique or talk about industry stuff. Free of charge. Is nothing that I don't charge for any of this stuff. It's just I do stuff like that because I would have loved to have somebody do that for me when I was kind of coming up in the industry and I knew nobody in the industry. So it's like, I know people see my experience and whatever, like, oh my God, you worked on all this stuff. And it's like, I'm more than happy to talk to you about anything. It's like, there's not a lot separates the beginner from the pro. It's just, I'm happy to kind of bridge that gap.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for coming by. And thank you to anyone who tuned in to listen or watched on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed this episode as well. Leave a comment down below if you have any suggestions or comments or critiques or anything. Just shoot me a message on the Kouryer Podcast Instagram page. And yeah, I'll probably upload this episode on 21st of July, the same time I record this episode. And the episode 300 will be uploaded right after that. And with that, folks, take care, stay safe. Hopefully, I will see you in the next couple of months. So for now, bye-bye.
Thank you. Good luck with your move.
Thanks.